She stayed silent while the world made up its own story. But when Ana de Armas finally spoke, it shattered every rumor. This wasn't a breakup caused by betrayal or scandal. This was a love story that collapsed under pressure no one saw coming. Why did Ana de Armas walk away from Tom Cruise when everything looked perfect? And what truth was she protecting by staying silent? Nobody expected these words to come out of her mouth for months. The world had been guessing, debating, and quietly obsessing over one single question: what really happened between Ana de Armas and Tom Cruise? Every appearance, every photograph, every moment of silence was turned into a theory. Social media fed the speculation. Headlines hinted at secrets. Fans waited for drama. But none came. There were no explosive interviews, no emotional talk show confessions, no dramatic social media posts written in the heat of the moment, no public accusations, no confirmations, just silence. And in Hollywood, silence often speaks louder than words. That silence led many to believe something scandalous must have happened behind closed doors. Some assumed betrayal, others imagined conflict, ego, or power struggles. The truth, however, turned out to be far more complex and far more human. Because when Ana de Armas finally broke that silence, she didn't do it to shock the world. She didn't do it to defend herself, and she certainly didn't do it to create headlines. She spoke quietly, carefully, and with a level of honesty that few expected. What she revealed wasn't the dramatic breakup story people had been waiting for. It was a story about emotional weight. Ana spoke about how quickly admiration can turn into pressure when the world is watching your every move. She hinted at how something that begins with curiosity and connection can slowly become overwhelming when expectations grow louder than feelings. This wasn't about losing love, it was about losing peace. She made it clear that the hardest part wasn't the relationship itself. It was everything that surrounded it, the constant attention, the assumptions, the idea that two people could no longer simply exist without being labeled, analyzed, and judged. This wasn't a story about celebrity drama, it was a story about timing. Two people can meet at the wrong moment. Two lives can intersect when both are still moving in different directions. And sometimes, even genuine connection isn't enough to silence the noise around it. Ana de Armas didn't speak with anger. She didn't speak with regret. She spoke with acceptance. She talked about choosing herself not because she stopped caring, but because she needed to protect her sense of self. In a world that often demands sacrifice for the sake of image, she chose something quieter and braver: clarity. Her words revealed the kind of heartbreak that doesn't explode, it slowly settles in. The kind that comes from knowing when to walk away before something beautiful turns painful. The kind that teaches you that love should add to your life, not take pieces away from it. And that's what made her honesty so powerful. This wasn't a confession meant to entertain. It was a reflection meant to heal. In the end, Ana de Armas reminded the world that not every ending needs to be loud to be meaningful. Some stories end in silence, not because they lacked depth, but because they were real. And sometimes, choosing yourself is the hardest goodbye of all. It all began quietly. There were no grand announcements, no red carpet confirmations, no carefully staged public appearances meant to send a message. Instead, Ana de Armas and Tom Cruise were first linked through simple, professional interactions, moments that, at the time, seemed completely harmless. They crossed paths through work, shared conversations, and spent time in the same creative spaces. According to industry insiders, what stood out immediately was not romance, but respect. There was an ease between them. Conversations flowed naturally. Ideas were exchanged with genuine interest, and slowly, something unspoken began to form. Those around them noticed it too, not because they were overly affectionate or dramatic, but because they weren't. They were seen together, never too close, never too distant, not trying to hide, but not performing for attention either. Just two people existing in the same space, comfortable in each other's presence. It was subtle, but in Hollywood, subtlety is enough. Soon, that quiet connection turned into raised eyebrows, then whispers, then headlines. Photographs were analyzed. Body language was dissected. A simple shared moment became a story waiting to be written by the public. Fans romanticized the idea almost instantly. A Hollywood legend with decades of history. A rising global star stepping confidently into her own power. Two different generations. Two worlds colliding. Too many. It felt cinematic, like something straight out of a movie script. But behind the scenes, the reality was far more complicated. Ana later hinted that what drew her in had nothing to do with fame, legacy, or status. It was something far more personal and far more rare in her world: presence. Tom Cruise, according to people close to her, was deeply attentive. When he listened fully. When he spoke, it was with intention. In an industry filled with distractions, that focus felt genuine. For Ana, authenticity has always mattered. She values real conversations over surface-level charm, and in those early moments, she felt seen, not as a headline, not as a rising star, but as a person. That connection felt real. But from the very beginning, there was something else in the room. Expectation. The moment the world noticed them, the pressure arrived quietly but heavily. Every interaction was no longer just theirs. It belonged to the public. Every meeting carried unspoken weight. Every appearance was viewed through the lens of assumption. What started as something natural began to feel observed. The narrative was being written before they had the chance to understand their own story. And when expectations move faster than emotions, even the strongest connection can begin to feel fragile. This wasn't about falling too fast. It was about being watched too closely. From the outside, it looked like the beginning of something magical. But inside, it was already becoming complicated. The space to explore, to grow, to understand each other was shrinking under the weight of attention. And that quiet beginning, the one built on respect and presence, was now facing a reality neither of them had planned for. Sometimes, the hardest part of a connection isn't the people involved. It's everything that comes with them. This is where the story takes a turn. Up until this point, everything had felt quiet, intentional, and grounded. But as the attention around Ana de Armas and Tom Cruise grew louder, something began to shift, not between them, but around them. Ana later revealed that the hardest part of this chapter was never the relationship itself. It was everything that came with it. The constant attention, the endless assumptions, the invisible pressure to fit into a narrative neither of them had written. What the world wanted was a headline-ready version of their connection, a Hollywood couple. A story easy to label and easier to consume. But what they were living was far more fragile and far more personal. And as the spotlight intensified, the space to simply exist as to individuals began to disappear. Every glance was analyzed as a statement. Every appearance became proof of something that may not have even existed. Every silence was interpreted as a secret waiting to be exposed. Ana admitted that she slowly began to feel like her personal life was no longer her own. Moments that should have been private were now public property. Conversations that once felt safe now felt watched. Even choosing to stay quiet became a story on its own. In that noise, something important became clear to her. She wasn't falling out of love. She was losing her peace. That realization didn't come suddenly. It built over time in small moments of exhaustion, in the emotional weight of being constantly observed, and in the growing sense that her inner world was being shaped by outside expectations. Ana has always valued emotional balance and authenticity, and she began to feel that both were slipping away. That's when she realized something powerful. Love should feel safe, not overwhelming. Connection should ground you, not drain you. And when love starts to feel like pressure instead of comfort, it becomes something else entirely. According to those close to the situation, Tom Cruise understood her struggle. He saw the weight she was carrying. He recognized how the attention affected her. There was empathy. There was care. There was an awareness that what they were navigating was not simple. But understanding doesn't always fix timing. Two people can care deeply for each other and still be standing at very different points in life. Emotionally, professionally, and personally, their worlds carried different demands. What felt manageable for one could feel overwhelming for the other. And that difference matters. Sometimes, love doesn't end because feelings disappear. It ends because the environment around it becomes too loud to ignore. Because peace becomes more valuable than possibility. Because holding on would require losing parts of yourself. Anna's honesty revealed a quiet truth many people recognize but rarely admit. Choosing yourself can be painful, even when love is still present. This wasn't a dramatic collapse. It wasn't a sudden goodbye. It was a slow realization that something meaningful could still be unsustainable. And in that realization, the story changed not into a scandal, but into a moment of clarity. For a long time after the split, Ana said nothing. No statements, no interviews, no subtle hints dropped through social media. In a world where silence is often misunderstood, many people quickly filled that quiet with their own conclusions. Some mistook it for indifference, others assumed secrecy, as if she were hiding a truth too complicated or too uncomfortable to share. But the reality was far more personal. In truth, that silence was grief. Ana needed time, real time away from noise to process what had been lost. And it wasn't just the end of a relationship she was mourning. It was the future she had quietly imagined. The possibilities that never had the chance to fully exist. The version of life that, for a moment, felt within reach. She later described it as walking away from something beautiful, before it had the chance to turn painful. Not because it already was, but because she could see where it was heading. That kind of decision doesn't come without cost. It leaves behind unanswered what-ifs and a sadness that isn't loud, but deep. During that period, Ana chose reflection over reaction. Instead of speaking in anger or defensiveness, she turned inward. She allowed herself to feel disappointment without turning it into blame. She sat with the heartbreak rather than trying to escape it through distraction or explanation. And when she finally found the words, they were not filled with bitterness, they were filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons she learned during that chapter. Gratitude for the emotional growth that came from facing difficult truths. Gratitude for discovering her own boundaries and for learning that stepping back can sometimes be the strongest form of self-respect. She made something very clear through her words and actions. She didn't blame Tom Cruise. She didn't blame fame, media attention, or public pressure. She took responsibility for her choice. That responsibility wasn't about admitting fault, it was about ownership. Ownership of her emotions, ownership of her needs, ownership of the decision to protect her inner peace, even when it meant breaking her own heart. Ana admitted that walking away hurt deeply. It wasn't an easy decision. It came with loneliness, doubt, and moments of questioning herself. But over time, she realized something important. Heartbreak can coexist with healing. The decision broke her heart, but it saved her spirit. And that distinction mattered. She chose long-term peace over short-term comfort, clarity over confusion, self-trust over external approval. In doing so, she reframed what strength looks like, not as holding on at all costs, but as knowing when to let go. Her silence wasn't avoidance. It was courage. Because sometimes, the most honest thing you can do is remain quiet until you understand your own truth. And when you finally speak, let your words come from healing, not hurt. That was the silence Ana de Armas chose, and in that silence, she found herself again. This is where the story becomes bigger than celebrities, beyond the headlines, beyond the speculation, and beyond the familiar patterns of Hollywood drama. Ana de Armas' silence and her eventual honesty reminds us of something deeply important. Not every love story is meant to last. Some are meant to teach, and there is no failure in that. In a world that often measures success by longevity, walking away is misunderstood. It's labeled as giving up, as weakness, or as regret. But Ana showed something different. She showed that walking away can be an act of clarity, a moment when you choose understanding over illusion, and truth over comfort. Her decision wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with accusations or public explanations. It came quietly, with intention. She chose peace over pressure, the kind of pressure that slowly drains joy and replaces it with expectation. She chose truth over headlines, the truth of her own emotional limits instead of a story the world wanted her to play out. And she chose self-respect over expectations, over the roles, labels, and narratives that were being written for her without her consent. In doing so, she changed the narrative. This wasn't the usual Hollywood breakup defined by rumors, conflict, or spectacle. It didn't follow the script audiences have grown used to. There was no villain, no dramatic reveal, just two people recognizing that what connected them was real but not sustainable in the world surrounding them. And that honesty is rare. Ana's story resonates because it reflects something many people experience but rarely talk about. The moment you realize that love alone isn't always enough, that timing matters, that environment matters, and that staying true to yourself sometimes means letting go of something you care deeply about. Her ending wasn't loud, but it was brave. It takes courage to step away from something that looks perfect on the outside but feels heavy on the inside. It takes strength to choose inner peace when the world expects you to hold on for the sake of appearances. And it takes honesty to admit that protecting your spirit is more important than fulfilling expectations that were never yours to carry. Perhaps that's why this story feels both heartbreaking and beautiful. Heartbreaking because something meaningful ended before it could fully unfold. Beautiful because it ended with self-awareness, instead of damage. In the end, Ana de Armas didn't just close a chapter, she redefined what a strong ending looks like. Not as a collapse, but as a conscious choice. Not as loss, but as growth. And that's the part of this story that stays with us. Because sometimes, the bravest love story isn't the one that lasts forever, it's the one that teaches you who you are and gives you the strength to choose yourself.